So, Ashley, what should I be writing on my blog nowadays? Should I write trendy content or should I write evergreen content? What's your take on it?
So there's a couple of ways you can approach it. I think forcing trend content, that's going to be bad. I think that if you are not putting trends or not focusing on trends that your business or your brand deserves to be talking about, then I would lean more towards evergreen content. However, as soon as those trends emerge and you do find one of those trends that your brand deserves to be at the center of the conversation for, that's when I would heavily sway the conversation towards talking about trends and putting trends content at the heart of your blog.
So one of my very first business venture was blogging, actually. And it was always a split between, at least my understanding was always split between, okay, if I want to have a compounding audience over time, it's more of a long-term play, I should write evergreen content because I won't get like thousands and thousands of and millions of views on my article in the first week, but like over time it will compound as it will always be relevant and potentially need only a few updates. When it comes to trendy content, I could have like a boost of traffic on my website for a short period of time, but then that's it. So I guess that's as far as my knowledge goes when it comes to like trendy versus evergreen content. In your perspective, what are the pros and cons of trends versus evergreen content?
Yeah, so I think straight away off the bat, you've got an idea that you can be first to the conversation. So with evergreen content, there's a lot of competition for that content. If we take SEO specifically, and we talk about search engine optimization, everybody's playing with the same tools, which means that they're getting the same content recommendations on the back of their research and their keyword research. So when it comes to evergreen content, there's a lot of competition there to appear, and it might be that people choose your competitor over yourself. With trending content, there's that opportunity to actually be the first to the conversation. You can beat your competitors to the jump because not a lot of people are taking a trend-focused strategy at the moment. And you can get in front of your audience before your competitors enter the conversation. So the first pro would be that essentially you can get in front of your audience quicker than your competitors can by being the first to that conversation. And then on the back of being the first, it's about building relationships, right? So our evergreen content, we're looking to help a user with a pain, need, want, or desire, typically. Trend content does the same things. So the same pros that you've got with your evergreen content, they correlate and respond well with your trend content as well. So it's building those relationships, it's building that sense of community, and it's bringing people into your brand community as well. So again, that's the second pro. If we turn our attention to cons really quickly, you highlight a really good point in that a lot of trends, there's that opportunity where it's going to be a short-term gain and maybe that long-term value is not going to be there for the trend content. However, if you get good at spotting trends, if you get good at knowing which trends are going to be likely to reoccur, if you get good at knowing, okay, this could be a biannual trend, this could be an annual trend, and focusing your efforts on creating content there, that alleviates that con a little bit. But definitely there's that issue of, yes, I could create content on this topic, but it's only going to be useful for while that trend's exploding. I totally accept that point. My counter to that point, and what I'd also sort of typically bring up with the brands that we discuss this with, is do the benefits or the traffic in that short term outweigh the traffic that we're going to get long term anyway? So if the search volume for the trend that we're talking about is currently at, let's just say 5,000 for the sake of argument, so right at that point of explosion or the exploding topic, there's 5,000 searches going on at that case. If the search volume long term for that sort of evergreen content is only 250, 500, and it's a highly competitive space, all of a sudden it might actually make more sense to go after that short-term value and do that repeatedly, as opposed to trying to sort of fight in a really competitive sort of ocean for low search volume terms or lower search volume terms. So yeah, they're sort of the pros and cons straight off the bat that I'd think of. That's the perfect situation. So, and that's where the strategies need to be moving, because the way we work with brands is we will deliver a roadmap of content, because at the end of the day, brands want to see what they're sort of getting into, what they're paying for. So we'll do the typical sort of keyword research at the start. Ours is a little bit different because we do social search. So we will do social keyword research and we'll be keyword mapping, and there's a whole process there. But once we've established what the topics are going to be, we'll plan them out on a roadmap and we'll deliver that to the client. But the way that we caveat it with clients is we will always say to them, if something emerges as a trend and we spot this trend, we will swap out that piece of content for August or that piece of content for September, and we will embed the trending content instead. And we can always come back to that evergreen content, because that's the benefit of it being evergreen. We can create it sort of beyond seasonality. We can create it whenever we like. Whereas the trend content, it might only be around for those sort of 6-8 weeks or even 2 weeks. So we need to be really proactive, reactive, and get into that conversation quickly. So yeah, ideal world, we would say to our brands, let's do a hybrid of both. Evergreen content becomes the actual roadmap of content, but then we're making a strategic sort of decision to embed trends into that strategy whenever we can.
Whilst we are in the kind of tactical aspect, what's the expected workload on each? Because I think you touched upon keyword research for evergreen content, right? And the way, again, my comprehension of it is, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it, like you do the research once for your evergreen content, you go through a whole lot of painful writing to make like a very, very good article because it's going to be there for the long term, but then it's done. You have maybe to update it every 6 months, every 12 months, whatsoever, but then that's it. And you might want to have like 15, 20 big pieces of strategic evergreen content. It's a one-time thing. The way I look at trendy content is that, as you said, right, it's going to last for a few weeks, but then that's it. So I have to anticipate that heavy, repeatable effort that's going to be required in order to always be putting out trendy content. Is my understanding of the workload correct here, or how would you go about that?
Yeah, so it's definitely more stressful, definitely. Strenuous, and as you say, it can be more sort of time. You can make it time efficient, and I'll get into that in a second, but it can take a lot more of your time creating that trending content than it can creating that evergreen content, especially in terms of a cumulative effort. But what I would say on that is it's that old adage of speculate to accumulate. You've got to again look at what the investment is versus the potential of being the first to that topic. So if we see, and some of the tools, and I'm sure we can get into and chat about the certain tools that we use, but the tools will give us an indication of how many people are searching for a trend and things like that. So we can make sure that it's actually worthwhile for the investment in terms of, okay, there's 10,000 people have searched for this in the past week. That all of a sudden becomes, okay, if we're going to be getting the majority share of that 10,000 search is going to land on our content because we're the only ones surfacing content, the extra cost that's needed to create that trending content might become worthwhile versus the lower cost of creating the evergreen content. So that, again, becomes part of the conversation there, really.
Love that. But so I guess that's the perfect transition then. How do you, maybe to start with the basics, how do you do trendy content? Well, trendy content that converts, maybe not just yet, but at least catch some eyeballs. How do you do that?
Yeah, so I'd say the first thing is really understanding the brand that you're working with. And again, that's probably transferable across a lot of the stuff that we do as agencies. But you need to be sort of immersing yourself in the industry that the brand works with, but then also immersing yourself within the community that brand is trying to connect with. That's going to give you a level of access to certain trends that start to emerge, because ultimately, if you're checking on a TikTok daily, if you're checking on whichever social platforms it is that those audiences are spending their time engaging with, you can be part of that conversation as at a strategist level. You can be sort of engaging with that content as a user would and recognize the trends as you're sort of going through a TikTok feed or on a Reddit feed or whatever it is. After you've sort of noticed, okay, actually, there's a lot of people or there's a lot of content surfacing on my TikTok feed talking about, and I'm just going to use a go-to example that I use all the time, talking about cowboy boots. What's driving that conversation around cowboy boots? So this was a trend a couple of years ago. It's always a fun one. So with cowboy boots, if you aren't immersed in that conversation, it could look like cowboy boots it's just exploded out of anywhere. When you start to say, okay, I'm immersing myself in this audience, I'm immersing myself in this industry, you start to make the connection between Beyonce starting to wear cowboy boots and you're starting to sort of drive them from a celebrity point of view. We've got the Love Islanders are styling these every night, and there was a certain Love Islander. I think it was Olivia. Someone in your comments is going to butcher me if it wasn't Olivia. But I think it was Olivia. I think it was Olivia. I could be wrong. But she basically styled and rocked cowboy boots and grew that trend in the UK. You had Beyonce and a few other celebrities that were leading it from a celebrity point of view. And all of a sudden, from a fashion industry perspective, cowboy boots exploded as a result of influencers and Love Islanders wearing it, and then celebrities wearing it as well. So again, we see that on a TikTok feed. We see people styling cowboy boots, talking about how to wear cowboy boots with X, Y, Z. Because we're immersing ourselves daily, we see that content, and then we can take the next steps. So immersing yourself is really important. The second thing is turning to tools like Glimpse. They are going to take those little hunches that you've got from seeing stuff on a TikTok feed or a YouTube feed, and they're going to give you the data insights to support that hunch. So they'll be able to show you, actually, this is X percent up year on year as a trend. It's X percent up month on month, quarter on quarter. They'll be able to give you insights on how many people are searching for it within a market. What's another good one? The channel breakdown. So they'll be able to show you which social channels are sort of leading the way with talking about and over-indexing or under-indexing with a conversation, which then can come into the next steps of where you would show up and where you'd want to develop content. But essentially, we would pick up on a hunch from our immersion in the industry or with the brand community. We'd support that hunch by heading to a tool like Glimpse and getting the data that then supports that trend. And then all of a sudden, we start to say, okay, this is something that we should be talking about for XYZ brand.
So I love that the only social media you've mentioned to understand trends in society as a cultural thing is TikTok. Is that deliberate, or is it pure hazard? I have a thought on it, but I want to hear yours first, Ashley. Why TikTok in particular?
So for me, it is literally just because that's where we're spending a lot of time at the minute. A lot of the brands that we work with tend to be fashion brands, fitness brands that are showing up on TikTok a lot. So my experiences are with TikTok. There are absolutely other channels. I think gaming conversations, it'd be Discord at the moment. I'd be embedding myself on Discord. Reddit is an absolute powerhouse when it comes to finance and the conversations that are happening around mortgages and things like that. Where else have we got? Facebook. People give Facebook a really hard time, and I do see why. But for the older audiences, they only have Facebook. So like my mum, for example, she has TikTok now because of what we're doing and because she wants to see what we're up to. But she typically spends most of her time on Facebook, and she's definitely within that boomer audience. So if we're targeting the boomers, we would look to Facebook. So yeah, it's TikTok just because that's where we're spending a lot of our time. There are absolutely other platforms at play, and it's just understanding. You have to understand, okay, if I'm working with Represent as a fashion brand, it might be TikTok and Instagram, and Pinterest is a big one for fashion brands as well. If it's a finance brand, it might be more Reddit and Instagram. It's just leaning on the industry and the brands and having that understanding of where the users are playing ball, really.
Yeah. So I have this So this podcaster that I love and listen to. And that's actually, here's the reason why Usam and I started podcasting, Chris Williamson of Modern Wisdom. And he talks about his housemate, who is his chief meme officer, the CMO. And it's like, he can predict any trend that's going to go on any social media platform 6 months from now. Because he's like, whatever's happening on TikTok right now, you're going to have the same on Instagram in about 6 months. And TikTok has become so heavily embedded to our culture and to the maybe the younger generations, you're right. But like whatever is happening super fast on TikTok. And then you can expect it to happen and have kind of the same effect a few months after on other platforms. So like you want to know what's going to happen on future platforms. You can just literally predict the future with TikTok. So that's why I'm like, that's smart. It actually makes sense to go on TikTok, understand the trends there, and implement them into your strategy as a marketer.
Yes, to be fair, that's super interesting, because the thing with TikTok that makes that possible, and Instagram are trying to sort of steal this sort of magic in the bottle, if you like, or lightning in the bottle, whatever you want to call it. They've really democratized that creation process. So anybody can go and create content on TikTok and can sort of succeed within the algorithm and sort of go viral and build a community on TikTok. Which means when people have got something to say, they go and have that conversation on TikTok, especially with the younger audiences. So that's why it's probably TikTok leading the way, is because they're such a powerhouse when it comes to UGC and people just being able to create content. That then becomes trends because people see some random creators' content and then all of a sudden they want to copy that and they're doing that trend and they're integrating that within their content. And then all of a sudden it just explodes and it's become a trend on TikTok. And yeah, it's because of that democratization of the creation process.
Love it. So how do you, to get a bit more tactical about the SEO aspect of things, how do you actually, so you can use tools like TikTok Daily, Glimpse to understand the trends. And then how do you go from understanding the trends to actually fitting this into an SEO strategy? Like, how do you go about that? Hey, if you're still listening to this, you probably find this conversation interesting, and that means that others might too. So the best way you can support this podcast for free is to leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to this show. This helps the podcast more than I could say. It means other SEOs can learn and get access to our amazing guests, and that will mean the world to me. All right, with that being said, back to the episode.
Yes, so again, once we've immersed ourselves in the space and the community, we would constantly be looking back to our keyword universe to say, actually, does this trend that we're noticing, does it lead back to the conversations that the brand have asked us to talk about in terms of the keyword research that we've conducted or the keyword universe that we've created? That would be the first port of call to sort of start making those links to the SEO elements. Because if we can say, okay, this trend of cowboy boots, again, is related to the footwear conversation that X brand has asked us to talk about, we can make that slight link to footwear and we can go and do keyword research to then support that. So it's not just keyword research informing the trends that we choose, but then also the trends could end up informing an extra element of keyword research. Then obviously it starts to follow a similar process to what a typical SEO blog would do, albeit we're working with content creators, we could be working with UGC creators, we could be working with EGC creators to create video content instead of blog content, typically. So then it's a briefing process. We say, look, we need you to hit these keywords. We need you to hit these sort of specific phrases within the content. And just as you would with an SEO brief where you're saying to a content writer, these are your keywords, these are the sort of H2s, these are the H3s. We're doing the same, but we're doing it to essentially rank on a social platform or over a Google SERP. And we bring that back to a Google SERP. We always bring that back to traditional search. But in terms of those SEO markers, it's just understanding what the SEO signals, ranking factors, functions are on the platforms that we're actually creating content for, and making sure that our brief hits those markers in the same way that we would if it was Google SERP.
So, Ashley, I love the examples that guests on this show come up with, because that usually gives you a bit of an indication of what maybe they are personally looking for. Are you looking for cowboy boots, Ashley? Is that what you're telling us right now? a whole closet. So, when we discussed what we were going to discuss in this interview, we came up with a sentence which was, "You should be doing SEO trends if you," and I invite you to complete that sentence, Ashley. So, if I'm a blogger, or if I'm actually scratch that, if I'm in online business or the webmaster or the SEO in charge of like content for a company, I should do SEO trends if what? How do I know if that's relevant for me or not?
Yeah, so I would say that you should be focusing on trending SEO content or trend-led SEO strategy if you are a brand that are looking to grow a community of users. So if you're looking to build brand advocates instead of just customers, that would be a definite focus for why you want to talk about trends. If you're looking to build relationships between yourself and your users, lean on trends. If you're looking to grow your share of search, grow your influence across the search universe and how you're appearing visibly across that search universe, lean on trend content. And then finally, is what all businesses ultimately come back to. But if you're looking to drive a positive revenue change, lean on trend-led content.
Which I guess is 100% of businesses who are trying to generate both different revenue trend. That makes sense. So that's actually an excellent transition. How do you convert that into business? And let me add a bit of flavor to this. I'm super strong on optimizing for what will eventually grow your business. You can have different objectives, of course. You can be about brand awareness. You can be about brand exposure and so on. But I think what 99% of the companies are optimizing for is how do I grow my bottom line? What I'm thinking about, and it's the same thing as views for the sake of views, right? Oh, I got like 2,500 views on my latest YouTube video that talks about this and that. But if it doesn't lead to any business outcome, I'm like, yeah, it's views for the sake of views. It's good. It's a vanity metric. Eventually, I'm establishing myself as an authority in the industry eventually. But it doesn't help my bottom line. And that's kind of the split I have between, okay, evergreen content, as you mentioned at the beginning, right? It's going to be about solving a problem, addressing a pain of the user to eventually lead towards, hey, if you want to, ease that pain, maybe you should look at chasing my product. When it comes to trend, it's like, okay, I guess I can make the link with cowboy boots. It's like if I talk about cowboy boots and I happen to sell cowboy boots, it's going to be an easy win. But what else? What if we're not in such a straightforward case? Like, how do you drive business with this?
Ultimately, there's still those links to informational SEO content that we can make. So there's that brand awareness. There's making sure that when people then move down the search journey, they're aware of, okay, this brand helped me at my earlier stages. So now that I'm considering a solution, let me go back and check that brand out. There's absolutely that. But I guess it really is that sense of growing community and growing advocacy. Because essentially what we can do is with our trend content, we can speak to people that are probably at the point of conversion with the trend content, build that relationship with them directly, and then get them to be recommending our brand to their friends and family through word of mouth. So because we've developed that advocacy by being part of that conversation, that leads to word of mouth recommendation. That's great. And that, again, is probably an easy use case. If we take something in terms of an industry, that's not an easy use case. If we look at something that's maybe not e-commerce and we say, okay, we're a fitness brand, how can we leverage this? It becomes part of being their pain and their gain and looking at that side of things. So if you're providing informational content that's still trending and providing that solution in your content, it doesn't always have to be about buying something. The solution could be, or the way that you show up in terms of that trend content could be answering the question or contributing to the conversation as a brand. And if you do that, again, that's going to lead to the brand advocacy metrics that we talk about, growing that sense of community, growing our social following. That's ultimately going to lead to conversion down the road. And then the biggest one for us, and a metric that we sort of turn to with a lot of the brands that we work with is we're ultimately looking to grow share of search, and that's back on a traditional SEO. So if we can say to a brand that this trend content has ultimately led to a 5%, a 10%, a 15% increase in people that are actually searching for your brand on Google, then that's how we would define success with a lot of the brands that we work with. So it's essentially helping with a pain, helping with a need, want, or desire, making sure that the content's set up and we understand which it needs to be. Because as you rightly say, with cowboy boots, it's easy. You're just telling a user that you sell cowboy boots, and that's grand. But with the fitness types queries, again, we work with a few fitness brands, it might be a little bit more informational content there, but it's still helping solve a pain, a need, or a want. So we do that, and then we grow a share of search on the traditional SEO. So I hope that answers your question.
100%. And what I find funny and interesting here is that you're going to be AKAs, surfing on trends, right, to drive more eyeballs towards your website. But eventually, what you're optimizing for on the long run is the long term. Like, we're going to build a brand, we're going to build a community, we're going to raise brand awareness so that more and more people talk about our brand, search our brand. And then when they are ready to purchase, they make the purchase because they've heard us on a trend where we've produced good content. So that's super interesting because at the end of the day,
I was going to say that sort of, and this is a little bit of a shameless plug, but at the same time, it's relevant to the conversation. That's where we noticed that the search sort of game was going and where digital experiences were starting to move. It's becoming much more of a connected journey. So rather than social content being that sort of short-term gain, short-term value content where you're sort of just demanding attention and then people move on and then to the next thing, social content's starting to move to where it can be that long-term game and where you can make long-term plays on social search and because of the search functions that are emerging. So that's a really cool point. And again, it's one that sort of drove our proposition when we was ideated for Deviation, really. It was connected experiences, connected search journeys across multiple platforms that can all do what SEO tries to do fundamentally at its core, which is that long-term value, building community, growing brand, growing share of search, all those things that we've talked about. That's essentially what our business was born out of a little bit, really. And definitely where I see the industry going overall as well. I don't think we're any way individual on that. I think that the industry is going to follow.
100%. There will be more and more emotional connection to brands rather than just like, hey, purchasing for utility purposes. I love that. So, Ashley, what's the number one mistake people make when it comes to trendy content? What have you seen?
Yeah, so I'd say the biggest and definitely the damaging's maybe a stretch, but potentially damaging, is talking about trends that you don't have the right to talk about just because something's got 50,000 people searching for it and you're like, oh my God, there's loads of people searching for this trend. Relevancy is so vital when it comes to trends because Gen Z specifically, especially, sorry when I can get my words out, Gen Z especially, they will call you out if it's not relevant. Like, they will take to Twitter, they will take to X, whatever the platform is, they'll take to TikTok, and they will call you out. Probably less X now, given the direction that X has gone over the past 12 months. But if you're talking about something that they don't actually think is relevant to your brand or that you're not supposed to be talking about, they will call you out on it. So brands talking about stuff that they haven't earned the right to talk about, or they're not an authority on, or they couldn't potentially be an authority on, that's the big issue, really. You can't just look at the numbers and go, there's so many searches, I'm going to create content on this. It needs to come back to that relevancy point always.
So you cannot over milk the cow of trends, if that's a good image enough. I'm literally translating from French here. But you need to be strategic also on how you pick the trends that you want to talk about and what type of content you put out about the trend that you've chosen. Otherwise, you might have a backfire, which is at worst damaging your brand, at best not doing much. Is that understanding correct?
And as we said earlier, the trend content it's definitely more expensive than creating evergreen content. So if you're doing it wrong, there's also that side of things as well, where it could be, oh God, we've created short form content for TikTok, we've done a long form video for YouTube, we've had editing for other social platforms to repurpose it, and it's done nothing. And again, it's because users have gone, well, you're not relevant to that conversation, so I'm not taking notice of you. So it comes down to the cost as well. There was another interesting point there around. Well, it's just left me. It might come back, but it's just left me.
Love it. Well, if it comes back, just let us know. I have actually two other questions that are a bit so in the same field, but I'm interested to get your take on it. So first off, can you do such a thing as updating a piece of content 6 months down the line that you've built initially to follow a trend? Like, is that something that happens?
Yeah. And you've just reminded me of the other thing as well, so we'll come back to that. So I'd say with the trend piece and then repurposing, where it's both ways. So yes, we can take a trend piece and then we can go in. Let's say we've created it for Google SERP in this example. We can go back and then say, right, okay, they were the trending keywords at the time, but what I now need you to do, the brief would be, I need you to go and put these now stable keywords in there. This is how it's sort of leveled out, and this is what people search you for around this topic now. And we can optimize for those keywords. But it works both ways in that we can take our existing long-form evergreen content and we can basically embed a H2, a H3, or however you want to do it for a trend. So if you've got a really good piece of content, so finance content, for example, let's say you've got a mortgage calculator on your website, which is one of the examples I've worked with previously. We have mortgage calculator on site. That's evergreen content. It's always going to do well. But then the latest budget comes out from the government and a certain prime minister tanks the British economy, and people are looking for information around how it's going to affect their mortgage, what they can do. We might go and put a H2 on that mortgage calculator page or on that hub to enhance that piece of content as well and get that extra rankings, extra traffic, and extra conversions. Because essentially you've already spent the money on developing that content. So if it does what it needs to do, but we can amplify it with trends, let's do that as well. So it definitely works both ways there. And the other point that I was going to make earlier, but I forgot, was you made an interesting point around over milking the cow. There's the point there of you can do too much trend content, or can you do too much trend content? My personal opinion on doing too much trend content would be, if it's relevant and it stays relevant and it's always relevant, then yes, do as much trend content as you want. But if you start questioning the relevancy, pull it out. It has to be relevant, so it always goes back to that relevant point. So if you're doing a trending piece of content every week, that's absolutely fine. If there's a different trend every week, do trend content every week. But if there's not and you feel like it's a bit of a stretch, that's when you lean back on your evergreen content and do your initial roadmap. So that was the point I wanted to make earlier.
Yeah, no, and that makes 100% sense. One last question for you, Ashley. Can you create a trend?
Oh, yeah. This is the magic. That's the gold. I've seen it myself with, when I worked at Rise at 7, they were gods at it, really. Or they started that process of, okay, can we create our own trends? Essentially, they would look for an insight, look for a media moment, and then say, okay, we've got this insight, we've got this media moment. Same process of how can we put our brand at the heart of this conversation. The rhetoric would change to how can we create a conversation that we put our brand at the heart of from the off. So essentially, yeah, you can start to create trends. The way that we sort of lean on that is we look to macro categories as trends. So we'll look to fitness as an industry, and we'll see, okay, what's popping off at the moment in terms of fitness space. It could be the latest supplement trend, it could be the latest nutrition trend, or it could be the latest type of workout, whatever it is. Then we will say, okay, is there a way in for our brand to create a trend that relates to this macro topic? We'll go and we'll say, okay, we have access to X, Y, or Z. Let's create a product around, let's create a trend around that. So if we take a product, it could be, let's have a think. Cosmetics is on the brain a little bit, so we're working with a cosmetics brand. So we'll say, okay, we're working with a cosmetics brand. Can we create a trend around this specific mascara, eyeliner, whatever the product is? How do we do that? Well, the way that we do that is we create UGC and we create EGC as the brand that are talking about how great this product is, what this product is able to do, how it can contribute to the looks that are trending. So if there's I ain't even going to try and name some looks that are trending at the moment off the top of my head. But if there's a certain way of doing makeup that's trending at the moment that we can then tie our products to and make our products the hero of, we do that to drive trend, to drive and create a trend around that product. So we tied it into this overall macro trend. We've then made our products the products that's trending and that's growing as a result of that macro trend. I will say to UGC creators, talk about this. We'll say to content creators, we want to talk about this. And all of a sudden, we're infiltrating the conversation with content all around this product. We make this product trend, and then all of a sudden, we've decided to dominate the conversation. So a little bit around the world there, but essentially, what you're trying to do, essentially, you can create trends, you can drive trends. It's all about identifying that macro trend that people are already discussing, and they're finding ways to put your product, your service, or a topic that you want to talk about at the heart of that, but growing that from the beginning so that starts to trend as well and it goes off on its own direction. That's really important.
Absolutely love this. So if people, because that's one of the main things you do, right, at Deviation. So if people want to find out more about you, about Deviation, and how to leverage trends in their SEO strategy, where should they go?
Yeah, so it's great timing really, because we have got a webinar that we're just about to drop on how to do this tactically. So we've talked a lot about the theory here. The webinar is going to focus specifically on how you would go into Glimpse and get that from Glimpse, how you would go to the next tool and get that from the next tool. So it's going to be much more tactical driven. Head to wearedeviation.co.uk. The link's on there for that webinar, and definitely check that webinar out. That'd be the best case.
Fantastic. Ashley, thank you so much for coming on SEO Guru.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for making it to the end. For more content updates, visit our website at ghapodcast.com, and don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn for more tips and insights on SEO. See you in the next episode.